everybody catches up to what we're talking about. So, this is Brian. That's you, Brian. Some glasses there, right? And you're trying to sell to a contractor, right? And a contractor, the big C, is probably trying to work on some major project out here. And whatever the contractor is, maybe they're working with, I'll guess it could be real estate, it could be commercial, it could be residential, whatever it may be. And typically, these companies right here come to the contractor, and what they want is a full bundle, right? A to Z. Plumbing, the electrical, this, that, everything, right? Packaged up. So they provide the package, right? And that's the pricing proposal that they give to their end customer. So here you are, you're selling your electrical services, and you're trying to be part of that package. Tell me is that about right? Give me something on that, Brian, make sure I'm on the right page. And so basically that's what's happening, right? So in this situation, we're trying to influence this person right here, the contractor. Now let's take a step back. Let's go back to some of the basics, because we always got to go back to the basics, right? We know, because you guys have been watching me for a while. Brian says correct. You know that we typically win. Remember this? You typically win 40% of your deals on average, cross-sectional study, and you'll lose 60% of your deals, right? Basic stuff. We have covered that already. And 60% goes, and we figure out 20% of that business goes to your competitor, but 40% of that actually goes to no decision, right? No decision, right? And if you remember what I said, when they looked at that 40%, 10% didn't make a decision because of price. So that leaves you with a whopping 30% who made no decision. What is known as status quo bias. They rather not make a decision than make a decision and be wrong. So your real competitor is not your competitor. Your real competitor is not your competitor. That's only 20%. We love to get that business. But a bigger piece of the pie lies right there in the 30, maybe 40% if you got the right pricing. So this is the dilemma, right? Brian, you're thinking, okay, how do I get the contractor to want to change? I used to have to sell through channels. And I had channels, we called them, we didn't call them contractors. For us, they were called systems integrator. So let's say we sold this piece of the solution, right? This piece of the solution, and then the system integrator would integrate a big system. I'm being very general here. A big system, and we would plug ours into that big system. So it was called a system integrator instead of a contractor. So I understand your pain, because sometimes, now let's go back to your situation here. The contractor, this person right here, already has a list of people that he works with. And you know what? He's been pretty successful working with these people. So he's thinking, I don't know if I want to work, redo somebody else. Here, you're trying to sell him something new, and he's saying, but you know what? I'm good with these. These are all good. I work with right here, I have the electrical contractor I currently use, and everything works out just fine, right? So this person has motivation for change is very what? It's very low. Motivation for change is very low. They're like, I don't want to change. Everything's going good right now. I've worked with this person for years. Everything's fine. I don't need your services. That's really the situation you're facing. And this is the status quo, right? The status quo bias, basically meaning he doesn't want to change. So how do we position our services to make this person at least pay attention, okay? So I'm going to start out like this, why, and I'm going to zoom in for you, Brian, and everybody else listening in. How would I approach it? Here's how I approached it. What I did is I tiered my contractors. By tiering my contractors, you guys know what I mean if you've been around long enough with me. What I would do is create tier 1, tier 2, and then maybe tier 3 if there is. Now, a tier 1 contractor is the best contractor I got. Now, so I would ask you, Brian, if you and I were sitting down together, I would ask you, say, okay, Brian, what are the big contractors we're going after, right? And you would give me a list 1 through 5, 6 through 10, okay? You give me 10 people, 10 companies, and that would be tier 1, right? So we could have 10 companies, 10 contractors in tier 1. We can do 10 here, and I'm just being very simple, and 10 there, right? This would be us. Then I would ask you, Brian, pretend that I'm interviewing you now, and we're going through your process. I said, Brian, tier 1 are very large contractors, very, very large contractors, and are they willing to do business with a small company? we would have that discussion, you and I. So I'm talking strategy right now before I get into tactic, right? Strategy. So you probably say, yeah, they probably won't want to change because they're very big contractors, right? But then I would ask, all right, well, let's go mid-market here. Now, mid-market is probably where you'll find 10 contractors, maybe more, right? And you say, you know, Victor, I've been more successful working with the mid-market, contractors. Now, I'll say mid-market, but you can use other qualifiers. For example, these could be national contractors, right? But you found that when you use local contractors in Nevada, I do better with local contractors. So let's say that these are national, right? And then these are local. By local, I mean statewide, right? And again, you can go down even to counties if you want with really small contractors. But let's say that you're right here, Brian. You say, you know what, Victor? When I'm working within the state, by the way, these nationals work not only in Nevada where you're located, they work throughout the rest of the United States. That's what I mean by a global or national contractor. This one right here, these contractors just work in Nevada and they work with that. So correct that motivation, risk versus reward, you got it. So then what I would do, I would look at this and say, you know what, this is the market I want to go after. I just want to work with contractors who are local and are not national companies. Why? In many cases, national companies don't have their headquarters there in Nevada where you're located. By the way, if you guys don't know, I'm talking about Brian. He's right here on the chat if you want to talk to him. But he's in Nevada, Las Vegas. So that's what I'm talking, the state of Nevada within the United States. And if you're a national contractor, sometimes national contractors that work in all 50 states will have their headquarters outside, let's say, of Nevada, right? Now, why is that a hindrance? Because many cases when you have a national contractor, the decisions are made at headquarters and they're not made locally. So that is one way of eliminating. By the way, I'm just giving you ideas of how you segment market. So I'm using national versus local to kind of give you an idea how to partition market, right? National versus, okay, but I'm part of I am part of a national company, but you're part of a national company, right? But the contractors you may be focusing in on are still within Nevada. So you're national, that's great. Now, if you're telling me you're selling national, are you selling national, Brian? In other words, is your territory national? Give me that real quick. Is your territory national? Let's see how fast this takes to respond on the internet. Are you local or national? Give me that. Correct. Territory is Nevada. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. So you still would be here, right? So even though you have a national company, I get that, you're selling locally in Nevada. So what I would do is say, who's in Nevada, right? Now here's what you can do. If we now say that we're going after tier market, only contractors that are based in Nevada, right? Then I could probably do one more layer of strategy before I get going. And that is, if I now know that I'm working out of the state of Nevada, right? I'm working out of the state of Nevada. What I can do again, Brian, maybe I would suggest to you, is I can tier my markets again. Now I'm only working with Nevada, so I can tier 1, tier 2, and then tier 3. Now, how would you use these tiers? In this case, you may want to look at the size of the contractors. Is it possible, for example, and there's so many ways you can slice and dice this. I'm just giving you strategy. But maybe you can look at the size in terms of revenue. So, for example, if you say anybody that is basically, has revenue of more than, let's say, 50 million US, that's tier 1. If they're less than 50 but greater than 25, right, million, that's tier 2. And then anything less than 25 million, that could be tier 3. Just giving you strategy first, right? So let's say again that you say, you know what, Victor, when I play here, and then maybe also, Victor, when I play here, I always win. Here, I don't know, I just seem to lose those. Whatever your data tells you. So let's say that right now, this is the number 1 market, this is number 2 market, and this one's always tough, so we'll call that number 3. Got it. So now, let's go after that company right there. Now we go after this market. So then what you do is you list out, you know how to do this. Brian, by the way, Brian, I know that you know a lot of this already. I'm just covering the basics for everybody else to catch up on the stream. So now I'll write down the top 10 contractors that are in this range. Now I have a strategy because now I know who my zebra is. And if you remember, a zebra is your ideal client profile based on the book Selling to Zebras, right? So if you know who your zebra is, these are the 10 companies, this is their revenue, and maybe, again, you can slice and dice this even more, Brian. You can say, these companies here work a lot with commercial, which is what I want. I don't want residential houses. I want commercial buildings. So this market, this tier 2, is aimed at commercial businesses, commercial contractors who sell at least $25 million and maybe less than 50. Now I know who I'm talking to, right? If you understand that, now I know who I'm going after, so this is now clear. I've taken Nevada, I've shaped it down. I said, okay, I'm going after these 10. Now, let's go to the next phase. Now we got strategy down. We know what 10 companies we're going after. So now this gives you, and I'm giving you the shortcut here. So now, somewhere here, let's be very basic about this. You got a CRM, right? And in here, you're going to input company 1 all the way to company 10. We're going to start keeping track of every interaction we have with these companies, right? So we're going to get all the data we can on each of these companies, right? You know, and there you want 2 things. You want competitor data. Who else are they buying from? Who else are they sourcing the electrical services from, right? Who are they getting their services from? Who's the competitor, right, would be the big one. And I don't know what else you would use as a way of qualifying or what other data you would need. But I would think the competitors, how big is that competitor? How many, electricians do they have, that work for the company? And then what I would try to do is, let's say that I identified 3 competitors, Comp 1, Comp 2, and Comp 3. That these 3 are actually buying from, let's say, the first company. So I would grab the first company and say, who are you buying from, right? And they're buying from, let's say, 2, maybe 3 competitors. Probably like 2, I would assume, in the service business, right? So now our job, Brian, is to figure out how do we get in, right? Because maybe you don't have an in right now, and that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get your electrical services in to the actual proposal, the actual bid, okay? So let me see, all good, great review, strategy. Okay, great. And so now, let's talk about, we're going to approach these companies now. We got the 10 companies. They're in Nevada. We've tiered them into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. We're looking at the $25 to $50 million range companies. Bam, grab those. Within those, I've highlighted 10, maybe 20 companies, but let's just say 10 companies. I grab the first company, I look at the data, and then I do some research and figure out who are they buying from? Do I have any contacts with the company? This is all the basic stuff I'm sure you already do. Who are the main decision makers? Who owns the company, right? Who basically makes decisions within the company? You got a CEO, but maybe you have, I don't know, an architect or somebody in that company who actually makes the actual decisions. So my first question to you would be is, if we pick one of those companies within the $25 to $50 million range, how much do you know about each company? Who are the decision makers? Who are the influencers? Who are they buying from? Those would be 3 things I would want to know, right? So you would have that. So again, let me just say that again. So in other words, who are the DMs? These would be the big guys. Who are the influencers, right? Right? And what did I say? Decision, influencers, and who are they buying from? Who are your competitors they're buying from? These are the 3 things I would want to know. This has to be part of my database, right? So now I got to figure out, how am I different, or how can I move them out, right? Let's step back a little bit. Let's step back, Brian. So now I know I'm going after a company. I know which company. I know who the decision makers are and the influencers, right? Decision maker, influencers. And I also know that they're buying from that company over there. They're buying the services from that company. My job is to try to get my services in. Now, let's look at this now from a tactical standpoint. Well, I should say, let's go psychological first and then go tactical. Psychologically, nobody wants to change. We've talked about this in the past, right? I said, if you look at the iceberg effect, right? The iceberg basically says 10% is when we talk about, here, let me just, sorry about that. That's what I wanted. 10% is up here, right? And this is where you talk about your features, your benefits, the advantages of your service, and how they can gain whatever, right? We've talked about that. This is where most people sell, salespeople. But I said 90% of the resistance you're going to get is like the iceberg. The real resistance is underwater. So let's go a step further. I haven't done this part yet at all with you guys, but let's go a step further. What is this resistance? What is that resistance underwater? Well, let's do this. Let me erase this, and I'm going to put it in 3 buckets for you. Okay? So let me put this in 3 buckets. The first bucket I want to put is, let's call it the risk bucket. Right? The second bucket is effort. Give me a chance here. And the third bucket would be cost. This is resistance, right? If you look at the variables of resistance, this is resistance right here. So what I would do is I would ask myself, if I approach a company and I want them to buy my services, replace somebody else, or maybe apply mine, use it as a complementary to somebody else's. In other words, if they're buying services from somebody, you can say, I want to replace them. That could be one strategy, trying to get that competitor out, or you could be a second source. In other words, they don't have to use you as their main electrical services contractor. They can use you for smaller jobs. So there's 2 strategies there. One is you want to kick the competitor out, and the other one is you want to what? Complement, take the smaller jobs within the services, within that contractor's proposal, because you get a little bit of business and then a little bit, you start expanding that just a little more. Make sense? So that's how I would approach it. So I now think about the decision maker and the influencer, Brian. I go, okay, what's the risk on their side? If I work with you, what's the risk? What's the risk? Well, one, you're unknown, right? They don't know you. I know you've probably got all kinds of certifications, but they don't know you. You're the unknown. They don't know you, right? Now, so you're the unknown. What other risks are associated with that? If you do an installation, right, and it goes bad, as an X, not good, what does that mean? What are the legal ramifications of that? What's the impact, right? Because this is what they're concerned about. They don't know you. And, so this also goes to what? Quality of your workmanship, right? Quality. So this is what they're concerned about. So I would have this in my presentation. As I'm talking to the client, I know that this is what they're worried about. Now let's go to effort. Let's say I get over the hump. You've convinced me. Victor, we've been around for 30 years. Here's all the big companies we work with. Here's all our certifications. And by the way, we indemnify you, basically making you guiltless. If anything goes wrong, we assume all responsibilities, right? You got me over that hump, right? You got me over the hump. Mentally, I don't feel that risk. But then I go, okay, Brian, I like you. Okay, great. You convinced me. You can do the job, and you've shown me the certification, and you're willing to take on the responsibility if anything goes wrong. And so now I'm over the risk mentally. But what about the effort? What does it cost for me to put you into the deal? What does it cost for me to put you into the deal? And by that I mean is what effort does the client have to go through, the contractor, to put you into the deal? To take somebody out and put you in, what does that require? So there might be some type of, by the way, I'm making this up, but you'll know what I'm talking about. There might be an approval process you have to go through. So the buyer's thinking, okay, if I switch out contractor services, then I have to basically, I got to go through this approval process, right? There's probably a lot of legal and a lot of paperwork that has to be done, right? Some approval paperwork. What else? I'm also like, by the way, going back to risk, my existing electrical service person already has a relationship. So, that's concerning also. So that might be a concern, right? In my head, So, and then you said effort equals intangible cost. It doesn't equal intangible cost. It equals actually tangible cost. It's like, what's it going to cost me? What do I have to do, right? What do I have to do to put you into the deal? So I got to approval, legal, paperwork. Maybe I got to figure out some type of way of working you into my schedules. So in other words, this person, the decision maker or the influencer has to do some work. There's some actual effort that they have to do, very tangible efforts that they have to do. They have to invest their time. They have to get paperwork. They have to get approval. And the customer's thinking, God, I got to do all these things. I don't want to do it, right? And then, so the last part, here's where you're right on the intangibles. What are the possible costs of working with you, taking out your incumbent, the existing contractor, and putting you in? What are the costs associated with that? And again, this one, I'm just going to put a question mark because we can guess on what the cost might be. In other words, they'll look at price, right? They'll look at price differential, right? The price delta. They'll look at the price delta. But what else? It might cost them. Maybe they have to work with you so you can understand their process. I'm making this up, by the way. Like, for example, they're bringing you into a deal, right? And it's a very special deal. So now they have to retrain you, or at least train you to how they do it. Their standards. Maybe they have standard operating procedures that differ from what you're used to. So that's going to cost them time to do some training, right? They're going to cost them time to do the training. And by the way, the training piece falls under effort. The time piece falls under cost. So now, let's just pause here. We don't need to go any further. I think you get the idea. So now, this is what's underneath. You've convinced them above the waterline that you're a great contractor. Got it. But this is all the stuff that's in their head right now. And so my question is, how do you put together a presentation that, or a conversation that convinces them that the risk is not that high, right? How are you going to make it easy for them? I'm not saying effortless, just frictionless as much as you can. And then how can you assuage any concern that you're not going to add cost or time to the project by bringing you on board? You're actually going to save them time. And this is the presentation I would give. So that's one way that I would approach a sales strategy with them. So that's the big picture right there. So you got cost, makes sense, integrated with their, it's all this stuff combined. So when we talk about selling services, this is what you're really looking at. Trying to figure out who you're selling to. So again, we talked about strategy, high-level strategy, right? The high-level strategy is you look at the market. And then instead of going national, you decide to go local, Nevada. Within Nevada, we said, okay, what are the type of contractors we're going after? Let's tier those up, right? Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. We use revenue, annual revenue, as a way of tiering the 3 customers. And then we said, you know what? I'm more successful with Tier 2, which was 25 to 50 million based on what we just discussed, right? So now that we have that tier, then we go find the influencers, the decision makers, and those are the people we talk to, right? And these are the people we connect with. And as part of your homework, now that you know that, now when you're talking to a decision maker or an influencer, right, you know what you're going to talk about. You're going to talk about everything that is right. What? Here, this is what you're talking about. That's what you're going to talk about when you talk to them. That's what they want to hear. They want you, remember, sales is all about 2 things, right? I say anxiety, right, and certainty. And your job is to reduce their anxiety and increase their certainty by speaking their language. And then again, we can get into strategies about how you would approach, let me go back the other way. How will you approach this in a presentation? This becomes now a conversation you can have. But I think if you sat down, put pen to paper, you could figure out pretty much what the resistance is going to be. And then ask yourself, in my presentation, am I really knocking down or lowering that resistance? And I'm telling you this, when people tell me about selling and it's difficult, it's usually because they don't understand the real resistance, right? They're still selling above the waterline. Features, benefits, and all that stuff, right? All the cool stuff, right? They're showing, look what it does. You can generate a report. You can do this. You can do this. Customer goes, I got it. I figured you could do that. But what the customer is not telling you, the unstated needs are all this stuff right here. These are the unstated concerns. So whether you're doing what Brian does as a contractor, you're selling a service, again, the questions are always underneath the waterline. In any service, the big question is, will it work? And maybe if you convince me that it does work, will it work for me? And in this case, working with you, will it be better? Will it be cheaper? And in the long run, will it be a great relationship? But we have to get over this hump first. So